Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome to part 1 of What If Obito Never Fell to Darkness. What if the masked man never existed? When Obito Uchiha survives his darkest moment, he rewrites history itself, turning a world of endless war into something unprecedented. A Shinobee civilization built on hope instead of hatred. If you guys enjoy this What If, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other What Ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. Obito's heart hammered against his ribs as he followed Kakashi through the winding passages beneath Shinobee Bridge. The flickering light from their makeshift torch cast dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls, creating an endless parade of phantom enemies that made his already anxious nerves jump at every sound. Behind him, Rin moved with quiet confidence, her medical supplies secured tightly against her body to prevent any telltale rattling that might give away their position. The strategic importance of their mission weighed heavily on his mind. Shinobee Bridge wasn't just another target. It was the primary supply artery feeding Stone Village forces along the entire Eastern Front. Intelligence estimated that destroying it would force enemy troops to extend their supply lines by nearly 2 weeks, potentially shifting the balance of the entire Third Great Ninja War. For a Genin team to be trusted with such a critical objective spoke volumes about Minato-sensei's faith in their abilities. "Stay close," Kakashi whispered, his voice barely audible even in the tomb-like silence of the underground tunnels. Intelligence suggests the enemy has increased patrols since yesterday. Obito bit back his usual retort about Kakashi being overly cautious. The mission was too important for their typical banter, and despite his teammates' sometimes irritating perfectionism, Obito had learned to trust Kakashi's tactical instincts. More than that, he was beginning to understand that their rivalry wasn't about proving who was better, but about pushing each other to become worthy of the trust Minato-sensei placed in them. The tunnel branched ahead, splitting into 3 directions like the fingers of a grasping hand. Kakashi held up a closed fist, signaling them to stop. Obito strained his ears, catching the distant sound of footsteps echoing from the leftmost passage. Enemy patrol, moving with the measured cadence of soldiers who thought themselves safe in their own territory. "We take the right passage," Kakashi decided after a moment of consideration. It's longer, but the explosion came without warning. The world erupted into chaos as enemy kunai embedded themselves in the tunnel walls around them, sparking against stone and filling the air with deadly shards. Smoke bombs detonated in rapid succession, turning their already limited visibility into a choking nightmare of gray and black. Through the haze, Obito could see the shapes of Stone Village shinobi dropping from concealed positions in the ceiling, their weapons gleaming in the smoke-diffused torchlight. "Ambush!" Rin shouted, already moving to press her back against Obito's as they formed their practiced defensive triangle. Kakashi's tanto sang from its sheath, deflecting a barrage of shuriken with the precise, economical movements that had made him a prodigy. They knew we were coming. Obito's own movements felt clumsy in comparison as he fumbled with his kunai pouch, his fingers suddenly thick and unresponsive under the pressure of real combat. This wasn't a training exercise in the academy's safe courtyards or a controlled spar with sensei watching nearby. These enemy shinobi wanted to kill them, to spill their blood on the cold stone and leave their bodies to rot in the darkness. A stone ninja materialized from the smoke directly in front of him, tanto raised for a killing blow. Time seemed to slow as Obito watched the blade descend toward his throat, his body moving through what felt like thick honey as he tried to bring up his guard. Too slow, too late, Kakashi appeared beside him like a silver blur, his own blade intercepting the enemy's strike with a sharp ring of metal on metal. "Focus, Obito," he snapped, driving his elbow into the attacker's solar plexus and spinning away to engage another target. Shame burned in Obito's chest, hotter than the smoke filling his lungs. Once again, Kakashi had to save him. Once again, he was the weak link that put his teammates in danger. But as he watched Rin smoothly transition from a medical stance to a combat position, her own kunai moving with determined precision to defend their rear, something crystallized in his mind. These people, his teammates, his bonds, were counting on him. Not to be perfect, not to be the prodigy that Kakashi was, but to be there when it mattered. To stand beside them and fight, even if his movements weren't as fluid or his techniques weren't as polished. Pain lanced through his left eye as something shifted behind his iris, the world suddenly sharpening into startling clarity. Colors became more vivid, movement more predictable. One Tamo spun lazily in his red iris, his first, unstable awakening of the Sharingan, triggered by the desperate need to protect rather than hatred or loss. The partial activation flickered uncertainly, but it was enough to see the pattern of the enemy's coordinated attack. The support beams, he called out to his teammates, pointing at the wooden structures that held up this section of the tunnel. If we bring them down, too risky, Kakashi replied, parrying another strike with mechanical precision, though Obito caught the slight tremor in his voice that spoke of barely controlled fear. Not for himself, but for them. We could bring the whole tunnel down on ourselves. Then we fight our way out, Rin said, her voice steady despite the obvious fear in her eyes. She'd already downed 2 attackers with precisely placed strikes to pressure points. Her medical knowledge turned to martial advantage, though her hands shook slightly with adrenaline. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Smoke and steel, the sharp crack of jutsu meeting jutsu, the wet sound of blade meeting flesh. Obito found his rhythm eventually, his flickering Sharingan allowing him glimpses of his opponent's intentions. Not with Kakashi's effortless grace, but with his own stubborn determination and growing understanding of how to fight as part of a team rather than as an individual. They were winning, slowly pushing the enemy back toward the tunnel entrance, when the real trap revealed itself. The explosive tags had been placed with surgical precision throughout the tunnel system, hidden in the spaces between support beams and buried in the loose earth of the walls. The enemy hadn't intended to win through direct confrontation. They'd planned to bury Team Minato alive, then dig out their bodies at leisure to confirm the kill. The first detonation shook dust from the ceiling and sent hairline cracks racing through the stone walls. The second brought down chunks of rock that crashed around them like deadly hail. By the third, Obito realized with crystal clarity that they were going to die here, buried alive in the dark like rats in a collapsed burrow. "Run!" Kakashi shouted, abandoning the last of their opponents to sprint toward what he hoped was still a viable exit. They ran through falling stone and choking dust, their torch long since extinguished, and their way lit only by the occasional spark of metal striking rock. Rin stumbled once, her medical pack catching on a protruding beam, and Obito hauled her upright without breaking stride. His Sharingan flickered with increasing instability as his chakra reserves drained, but he pushed through the growing fatigue. Kakashi led them through turns and branches in the tunnel system with desperate precision, but even his enhanced reflexes couldn't predict the structural failures cascading through the mountain above them. The final collapse began as they reached what should have been the exit tunnel. A massive support beam, undermined by the explosions and weakened by decades of water damage, gave way with a groan that Obito felt in his bones. The ceiling came down in a rushing avalanche of stone and earth, and he realized with perfect, terrible clarity that they weren't going to make it. Rin was directly beneath a massive slab of stone, as large as an ox cart and just as deadly. Her face was turned upward in horror as the crushing weight bore down on her. Kakashi was too far away, still struggling with a partially collapsed passage ahead of them, panic flashing across his features as he realized he couldn't reach her in time. In that moment, Obito's flickering Sharingan finally guttered out, his chakra reserves completely spent, but he didn't need enhanced vision to see what mattered most. There was no time for jutsu, no time for anything but the most basic of human responses. Obito threw himself forward, his body moving without thought or hesitation. If Rin died, something essential would break inside both him and Kakashi. If Kakashi lost another teammate after everything that had already happened between them, the guilt would destroy him completely. These were his precious people, his teammates, his family in all the ways that mattered. The stone slab struck him across the left side of his body with crushing force. Pain exploded through every nerve, white-hot and absolute, as he felt his ribs crack and his left arm shatter. Blood filled his vision, leaving him with only a red-tinged blur to see the world through. But he'd managed to shove Rin out of the direct path of the collapse, and that was worth any amount of personal agony. He was dimly aware of being pinned, crushed beneath what felt like the weight of the world. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear Kakashi shouting his name with an edge of raw terror that he'd never heard before. "Not here, not now," Kakashi's voice cracked with desperation and fury at his own helplessness. Rin was calling for him as well, her voice thick with tears and medical training warring with emotional devastation. "Stay with us. Just stay conscious, we're going to get you out." "I'm okay," he tried to say, though the words came out as more of a wheeze. Blood was filling his mouth, but he could still speak, could still think. Protected. "My precious people." The darkness was creeping in at the edges of his vision when he felt it, the familiar sensation of his sensei's chakra signature, blazing like a beacon in the collapsing tunnel. Minato-sensei was here, which meant rescue was possible. But more than that, it meant he'd succeeded in what mattered most. His teammates were alive, those he fought for would survive. As consciousness began to slip away, Obito made a vow in the darkness of his own mind. If he lived through this, when he lived through this, he would become strong enough to protect everyone who mattered to him. Not through hatred or vengeance, but through the same light that had driven him to shield Rin from the falling stone. He would become Hokage, but not for glory or recognition. He would become the kind of leader who ensured that no one's precious people had to die in the darkness, alone and afraid. The last thing he saw before the blackness claimed him was a flash of yellow light, bright as the sun and warm as hope itself. Minato Namikaze had been fast his entire life, but he had never moved as fast as he did in the moment when he felt his students' chakra signatures flare with panic and pain deep beneath Kanabi Bridge. He materialized in the collapsing tunnel like a golden lightning bolt, his chakra blazing bright enough to illuminate the falling stones around him. The situation registered in his tactical mind with ruthless clarity. Structural collapse, multiple cave-ins, 2 students in immediate danger and 1 trapped beneath crushing weight. "Sensei," Rin's voice cut through the rumble of falling stone, high and desperate. She was pressed against the tunnel wall, her medical bag clutched to her chest and tears streaming down her dust-covered face. "Obito's trapped. The stone, I can't move it." Kakashi was already working at the pile of debris with methodical fury, his hands bloody from clawing at the stone and panic written across his usually composed features. "He pushed Rin out of the way," he reported without looking up from his desperate digging, his voice hollow with barely controlled terror. "Took the hit himself, just like he always said he would." Minato's hands were already moving through complex seals. The standard flying thunder god wouldn't work here, too much mass, too much weight. But he'd been developing theoretical modifications for months, variations designed for battlefield medical evacuation. He'd never tested them in actual combat, but the mathematical principles were sound. "Stand back," he ordered his students, his voice carrying calm authority. "What I'm about to attempt requires absolute precision." Space bent around his will. Instead of moving the stone slab, he fractured its crushing force across dozens of dimensional reference points, spreading impossible weight into manageable pressure. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the technique drained his chakra reserves, but the stone lifted. Obito drew his first ragged breath in what felt like hours. "Rin, medical assessment," Minato ordered as he knelt beside his injured student. "Kakashi, establish a perimeter." Rin's hands moved over Obito's battered form, her training taking over despite the tears flowing down her cheeks. Her voice wavered but held steady as she fought through her emotional response. Multiple rib fractures on the left side, severe trauma to the left arm, broken in several places. "There's blood from his eye, but I don't think there's permanent damage. His spine feels intact, breathing is labored but steady." "Internal bleeding?" Minato asked, his own diagnostic jutsu confirming her assessment. "I'm not sure," Rin admitted, her inexperience showing through her determination. "His chakra network seems stable, but there could be damage I'm not skilled enough to detect. He needs immediate surgery at the hospital, sensei." "I can stabilize him, but—" "You're doing perfectly," Minato assured her, then turned to Kakashi. "Status report. Enemy forces have withdrawn," Kakashi replied, his voice carefully controlled despite the obvious relief in his posture. In the distance, Minato could sense other chakra signatures approaching, Konoha reinforcements responding to the explosions. "They're likely regrouping to avoid our backup teams." Minato completed his diagnostic scan, relief flooding through him. Obito's injuries were severe but not fatal. The boy would recover, would fight again, would continue on the path toward his dream with his heart unmarked by devastating loss. "He's going to be fine," Minato said firmly. "Your teammate is tougher than he looks." Just then, Obito's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but aware. His lips moved, trying to form words despite his injuries. Minato leaned closer. "My friends," Obito breathed, his eyes searching for and finding first Rin then Kakashi. "Safe, are they safe?" "Yes," Minato said simply. "You protected them, Obito. You did exactly what a shinobi should do." "Good," Obito whispered, and despite the pain medication Rin was administering, his face relaxed into something approaching satisfaction. That's what matters." As they prepared for extraction, Kakashi carrying Obito with careful strength while Rin monitored his vitals, Minato found himself thinking about the choice his student had made. Not the tactical decision, which had been questionable at best, but the human one. The instant, unthinking willingness to sacrifice himself for others. It was the kind of choice that revealed who someone truly was beneath all their training and technique. What Obito had revealed was something precious and rare, a heart that would always choose protection over self-preservation, compassion over calculation. As they emerged into the gray dawn light above Kanabi Bridge, Minato smiled despite the lingering tension. He had seen many prodigies in his time, students with incredible natural talent and impressive bloodline abilities. But true leaders weren't made from talent alone, they were forged in moments like this. Obito Uchiha was going to make an exceptional Hokage someday. Deep in the tunnels beneath the land of grass, white Zetsu emerged from the earth like a pale flower blooming in reverse. His yellowish eyes reflected the dim light as he processed what he had witnessed through his perfect sensory abilities. Madara-sama, he reported to the ancient figure seated in the shadows of their hidden sanctum. The Uchiha boy has survived. Minato's intervention was more decisive than anticipated. Uchiha Madara's eyes opened slowly, eternal Sharingan patterns spinning lazily. For so long, he had been patient, orchestrating the perfect tragedy. The boy was meant to witness his beloved teammate's death, to let despair corrupt his pure heart and guide him down the same dark path Madara himself had walked. Survived, Madara's voice was barely a whisper, and the girl, unharmed. The boy shielded her at the cost of his own injuries. There was something else. His Sharingan awakened not from loss or hatred, but from the need to protect. It was unusual. Madara was silent, his ancient mind turning over implications. Sharingan awakening through love rather than loss suggested the boy's character might be more resistant to corruption than anticipated. The fourth's technique, a modification of Flying Thunder God, designed to redistribute weight rather than transport objects. Highly advanced. It suggests Konoha's leadership is more innovative than we assumed. Another troubling development. If Konoha was developing new applications for existing jutsu, it complicated future plans considerably. The boy's condition, he will recover fully. His bonds with his teammates have been strengthened rather than broken. The Hotake boy showed genuine terror at the prospect of losing a comrade. Madara fell silent, fingers drumming against his throne. So many carefully laid schemes, all dependent on a single moment of tragedy that had been averted by seconds. He could try again. There were other ways to introduce suffering into young Obito's life, other catalysts for darkness. But as he considered his options, Madara found himself remembering another young man who had once worn that same expression of satisfaction at protecting his loved ones. His brother Izuna, dying content to have served their clan. His friend Hashirama, extending peace despite the blood between them. When had he stopped seeing such moments as worthy of respect rather than obstacles to overcome? Continue monitoring, he instructed finally. The boy remains of interest, but we will not act immediately. Let him recover, grow stronger in his convictions. Sometimes the most interesting games are won not through pieces we corrupt, but through those that refuse to be moved. As Zetsu sank back into the earth, Madara wasn't entirely certain of his own motivations. Perhaps after witnessing a young boy choose love over fear in the face of death itself, some small part of his original self, the part that had once believed in Hashirama's dream, was stirring again. Time would tell which instinct proved stronger, his desire to remake the world according to his vision, or this inconvenient flicker of curiosity about what new flame of will might rise from these children. For now, he would wait and watch, but he had not abandoned his grand design entirely. After all, even immortal legends understood that the most profound victories required the most patient preparation. In a hospital bed in Konoha, hours later, Obito Uchiha would wake and reaffirm his vow to protect everyone's precious people. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, an ancient schemer found himself genuinely curious whether such idealistic dreams might prove stronger than the hatred he had cultivated for so long. The game, it seemed, was far from over. The first thing Obito noticed when consciousness fully returned was that he could still see out of both eyes. The second thing was that Kakashi had fallen asleep in the chair beside his hospital bed, his silver hair falling across his face in an uncharacteristic display of vulnerability. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of long hours spent keeping vigil, and his usually pristine uniform was wrinkled and dusty from the tunnel collapse a few days ago. The third thing Obito noticed was that his left arm was encased in what felt like half the bandages in Konoha Hospital, and moving it sent pain flaring like lightning through his shoulder and chest. But he was alive, and that made it bearable. "You're awake," came Rin's soft voice from his other side. She looked exhausted but relieved, her medical bag open beside her as she checked his vitals with professional efficiency that still carried traces of the fear she'd felt in those tunnels. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a mountain," Obito croaked, his throat dry as sandpaper. "But I'm okay. We're all okay, right?" "All okay," she confirmed, offering him water through a straw. "Minato-sensei says the mission was a complete success. After he extracted us, a parallel squad completed the bridge demolition. Kanabi Bridge is down, and the intelligence we gathered about Stone Village's tunnel networks is already being used to reroute patrol paths and identify potential ambush sites." Obito nodded weakly, then winced as the movement sent spikes of pain through his neck and shoulders. The water helped, but every small motion reminded him of just how close they'd all come to dying in the darkness. "How long was I out?" 3 days, Rin said, her hands glowing faintly with diagnostic chakra as she monitored his recovery. "Your injuries were extensive. Fractured ribs, compound breaks in your left arm, severe bruising across your torso, but nothing that won't heal completely with time and proper treatment." At the sound of their voices, Kakashi stirred in his chair, silver eyes opening with the instant alertness that marked him as a true shinobi even in sleep. For a moment, relief flashed naked across his face before his usual mask of composure slipped back into place. "About time," he said, but his voice carried none of its usual sardonic edge. "You've been unconscious for so long that Rin was starting to consider more drastic medical interventions." "I was not," Rin protested, though a faint blush colored her cheeks. "I was just concerned about potential complications from the head trauma." Obito managed a weak smile at their familiar banter, but he could see something different in both his teammates' eyes, something deeper than relief or professional concern. In Kakashi's carefully controlled expression, he glimpsed the raw terror that had broken through his defenses when the stone was falling. In Rin's overly bright smile, he recognized the same desperate fear he'd felt when he thought she was about to die. They had all stared death in the face together, and the experience had left its mark on each of them, not through trauma, but through an understanding of what they meant to each other. "Sensei wants to see you as soon as you're feeling up to visitors," Kakashi continued, settling back in his chair with obvious reluctance to leave. "But the medical staff has strict orders that you're not to be overwhelmed." "I feel fine," Obito lied, then immediately contradicted himself by wincing as he tried to shift to a more comfortable position. "Okay, maybe not fine, but better, good enough to talk." Rin's expression turned stern in the way that meant she was about to invoke her medical authority. "You need rest, proper nutrition, and time for your body to heal. Pushing yourself too hard too fast will only set back your recovery." "Listen to her," Kakashi added, and there was something almost pleading in his usually confident voice. We need you to get better properly. No shortcuts, no pushing through the pain to prove something, just heal." The vulnerability in his teammates' words hit Obito harder than any physical injury could have. Kakashi, genius prodigy, heir to the White Fang's legacy, the boy who never seemed to need anything from anyone, was asking him to take care of himself. Not for his own sake, but for theirs. "I will," Obito promised, meaning it completely. "I'll do whatever it takes to get back to full strength. We're a team, right? That means I can't let you down." Something passed between the three of them in that moment, a deeper understanding that transcended words. They had faced the possibility of loss together, and emerged with their bonds not broken by trauma, but strengthened by shared vulnerability. The easy camaraderie they'd built over months of training had been forged into something unbreakable in the crucible of near-death. When Minato arrived an hour later, he found all 3 of his students huddled around Obito's bed, sharing a meal that Rin had somehow convinced the hospital staff to allow despite regulations about outside food. The sight of them laughing together, carefully, mindfully, but genuinely, brought a smile to his face that he didn't try to hide. "I see my patient is feeling better," he said from the doorway, his presence immediately drawing their attention. "Sensei," Obito tried to sit up straighter and immediately regretted it as his ribs protested the movement. "I'm sorry about the mission complications. If I'd been faster or better prepared—" "Stop," Minato interrupted gently, moving to take the chair that Kakashi vacated for him. The mission was a success by every metric that matters. The objective was completed, valuable intelligence was gathered, and all team members returned alive. Everything else is just learning experience. "But the ambush was anticipated in our planning," Minato said firmly. "Tunnel fighting against defenders on their own territory always carries risks. What I didn't anticipate was how well you would work together under that kind of pressure." He looked at each of them in turn, his blue eyes warm with genuine pride. Kakashi, your tactical leadership kept the team focused and coordinated during the initial assault. Rin, your medical support and combat adaptability were exceptional. And Obito, he paused, his expression growing serious. What you did in that final moment, protecting your teammate without regard for personal cost, that's the kind of decision that defines not just a good shinobi, but a good person. Obito felt heat rise in his cheeks, but also a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with embarrassment. Anyone would have done the same. No, Minato said quietly. They wouldn't. That kind of selfless courage is rarer than you might think, and more precious than any jutsu or bloodline ability. It's something that can't be taught, only recognized and cultivated. Minato leaned forward slightly, his tone taking on the quality it held when he was sharing important tactical information. Which brings me to why I'm here, beyond checking on your recovery. I want to discuss some changes to our training regimen once you're cleared for active duty. Kakashi and Rin exchanged glances, then looked back at their sensei with obvious curiosity. Even Obito perked up despite his injuries, eager to hear what modifications their near disaster had inspired. The coordination you demonstrated under extreme pressure suggests that you're ready for more advanced team exercises, Minato continued. But I want to approach them differently than traditional training methods. Instead of focusing primarily on offensive capabilities and individual improvement, I want to develop what I'm calling a rescue-first doctrine. Rescue first? Rin asked, her medical training immediately making her interested in the concept. The idea is that every technique, every tactic, every strategic decision should be evaluated not just for its combat effectiveness, but for its potential to extract teammates and civilians from dangerous situations, Minato explained. Mission success means nothing if it comes at the cost of lives that could have been saved. Obito found himself nodding despite the pain the movement caused. This was exactly the kind of thinking he'd been trying to articulate for months, the idea that true strength wasn't about defeating enemies, but about protecting precious people. How would that work in practice? Kakashi asked, his tactical mind already working through the implications. Multi-layered planning, Minato replied. Every mission plan includes not just primary and secondary objectives, but specific extraction routes, fallback positions, and contingency measures for team member incapacitation. We'll also modify our success metrics. Completion time and collateral damage prevention will carry equal weight with objective achievement. He gestured toward Obito's bandaged form. If I'd been better prepared for tunnel collapse scenarios, if we'd had pre-established extraction protocols, this situation might have been prevented entirely. I'll pilot this approach with our team first, then if it proves effective, present the framework to command. Or it might not have, Rin said thoughtfully. But we would have been better equipped to handle it. Exactly. Minato's approval was evident in his voice. Preparation doesn't guarantee success, but it maximizes our options when things go wrong. And in our line of work, things will always eventually go wrong. Kakashi was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his words carried a weight that suggested he'd been considering this idea for longer than just the current conversation. Sensei, what would you think about implementing some kind of shared knowledge system? Not just for our team, but eventually for the village as a whole. What do you mean? Jutsu libraries, tactical databases, technique cross-training between clans and specializations, Kakashi explained, his usual reserve giving way to genuine enthusiasm for the idea. If shinobi shared their knowledge more freely instead of hoarding it as clan secrets or personal advantages, everyone would be better prepared for unexpected situations. Minato's eyebrows rose slightly. The suggestion was radical by Konoha standards, where clan techniques and family jutsu were closely guarded secrets passed down through bloodlines. But it was also innovative in a way that appealed to his constantly evolving approach to shinobi arts. That's an interesting proposal, he said carefully. It would face significant political resistance from the clans. Maybe, Kakashi admitted, but if the alternative is more situations like what happened in those tunnels, where teammates die because they don't have access to techniques that could save them. He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Traditional secrecy had its place, but not at the cost of lives that could be preserved through knowledge sharing. I like it, Rin said suddenly, surprising them all. Medical jutsu already works on the principle of shared knowledge. We publish our techniques, collaborate on research, train anyone who shows aptitude regardless of their background. If we can do it with healing arts, why not with other specializations? Obito felt a surge of pride at his teammates' forward thinking. This was exactly the kind of innovation that the Shinobee world needed, not just new ways to fight, but new ways to protect and preserve life. Start small, Minato suggested after considering their proposal. Develop a shared knowledge base for our team first. Document techniques, tactical insights, lessons learned from each mission. We'll store it in scroll format in our team room and track metrics like injury reduction and extraction time improvements. If it proves effective, we can explore expanding the program. I can handle the medical documentation, Rin volunteered immediately. Cross-reference injury patterns with successful treatment approaches, analyze which healing techniques work best in field conditions. I'll focus on tactical analysis, Kakashi added. Mission planning, enemy behavior patterns, environmental factors that affect success rates. They both looked expectantly at Obito, who felt a moment of uncertainty. His teammates were proposing to document their specialized knowledge. What could he contribute that would be equally valuable? He began, then stopped, thinking, what was his strength? What perspective could he offer that complemented their medical and tactical expertise? Then it came to him, clear as the moment when his Sharingan had first activated. Team dynamics, he said with growing confidence. How different personality types work together under stress, what kinds of communication break down in crisis situations, how to maintain morale and trust when everything's going wrong. Minato's smile was brilliant, perfect. Between the three of you, you'll have all the major aspects of Shinobee operations covered: medical, tactical, and human factors. Over the following weeks, as Obito's injuries slowly healed and his strength gradually returned, the three students threw themselves into developing their shared knowledge project with the enthusiasm of teenagers given permission to revolutionize the world. Rin created detailed medical charts that documented not just treatment techniques, but pain management strategies and psychological first aid for trauma situations. Her meticulous notes on how different personality types responded to injury and stress became invaluable reference materials. Kakashi developed tactical matrices that broke down mission types, environmental factors, and enemy capabilities into quantifiable variables that could inform strategic planning. His analytical mind proved perfectly suited to identifying patterns and predicting outcomes based on past experience. Obito, despite his continued recovery limitations, contributed insights into team chemistry that neither of his more technically focused teammates had considered. He documented how different combinations of personalities affected group decision-making, communication patterns, and stress responses under pressure. But more importantly than their individual contributions was how the project changed their approach to training itself. Their exercises became less about individual performance and more about synchronized cooperation. Instead of competing to see who could hit targets fastest or execute techniques most perfectly, they focused on reading each other's intentions and adapting their actions to support the team's overall effectiveness. Obito's partially awakened Sharingan, still unstable and prone to flickering out at inconvenient moments, became an asset rather than a frustration. He learned to use its brief moments of clarity, limited to short intervals to avoid strain during his recovery, to read his teammates' micro-expressions and body language, calling out tactical suggestions based on what he observed. Kakashi left side, Rin's got your back covered, he'd shout during sparring sessions, his red eye spinning as it caught details that his normal vision would miss. Rin, medical kit, Kakashi's favoring his right ankle, he'd warn, spotting the subtle signs of an old injury acting up before it could affect their formation. Both of you, incoming technique from the northwest, earth-based, prepare for ground disruption, he'd announce, his Sharingan's ability to read chakra flow giving them precious seconds of advance warning. Gradually, they developed an almost telepathic level of coordination. Kakashi would begin a hand seal sequence, and Rin would already be moving to the position where his technique would require medical support. Rin would start treating an injury, and Obito would automatically shift to cover her blind spots without being asked. Minato watched their progress with growing amazement and pride. He had trained many teams over the years, but he had never seen students develop this level of intuitive cooperation so quickly. More importantly, he had never seen young shinobi so clearly prioritize each other's safety and well-being above personal advancement. They're not just becoming better individually, he confided to Kushina one evening as they walked through the village together during his brief respite between deployments. They're becoming something entirely new as a unit. A team that's genuinely stronger than the sum of its parts. Is that unusual? Kushina asked, her hand warm in his as they paused to watch the sunset paint the Hokage monument in shades of gold and orange. Very, Minato replied thoughtfully. Most shinobi teams develop good coordination through experience and training, but there's almost always an underlying current of individual ambition. Personal goals that sometimes conflict with team objectives. He gestured in the direction of the training grounds where his students spent most of their free time. But these three seem to have internalized the idea that they're only as strong as their weakest member, only as successful as their most vulnerable moment. It's remarkable, actually, and dangerous, Kushina noted perceptively. That level of emotional investment in each other's welfare could be a liability if they ever have to make hard choices. True, Minato acknowledged. But I'd rather have students who care too much than ones who don't care enough. We can teach tactical detachment. We can't teach genuine compassion. As if summoned by their conversation, the subject of their discussion appeared on the path ahead of them. Team Minato was walking back from an evening training session, all three looking tired but satisfied with their progress. Obito's left arm was still in a sling, but his movements were much more fluid than they'd been even a week earlier. "Sensei," Rin called out when she spotted them. "Perfect timing. We wanted to show you the new formation we've been working on." "Right now?" Minato asked, amused by their enthusiasm. "It's getting dark. That's part of the point," Kakashi explained. "Low visibility conditions require different communication strategies. We've been developing a system of subtle signals that work even when verbal coordination isn't possible." Despite Kushina's amused eye roll at her husband's inability to resist pedagogical opportunities, Minato found himself genuinely curious about their innovation. "Show me." What followed was a demonstration that would have impressed seasoned Jonin teams. Moving with careful precision through a series of mock combat scenarios, the three students communicated through barely perceptible gestures, changes in stance, and positioning cues that conveyed complex tactical information without a single spoken word. Obito's role was particularly fascinating to watch. With his Sharingan still too unstable for reliable use, he'd learned to compensate by reading his teammates' intentions through purely human observation skills. The tilt of Kakashi's shoulder that indicated he was preparing a lightning technique. The way Rin shifted her weight when she was about to move from defensive to offensive positioning. "This is extraordinary," Minato murmured to Kushina as they watched. "They're operating at a level of nonverbal communication that usually takes years to develop." "How long until Obito's cleared for active duty?" she asked quietly. "Another 2 weeks, according to the medical staff. His bones are healing well, but they want to be sure there are no complications with his chakra pathways." "And then," Minato smiled, his blue eyes reflecting the pride he felt in his students' development. "Then we see what this new approach to teamwork can accomplish in the field. I have a feeling they're going to surprise a lot of people." As the impromptu demonstration concluded, and his students gathered around to receive feedback, Minato reflected on how dramatically things had changed since that day in the tunnels beneath Shinobee Bridge. Obito's near-death experience hadn't traumatized his team or driven them apart through guilt and fear. Instead, it had crystallized their understanding of what truly mattered. Not individual glory or personal advancement, but the unshakable commitment to ensure that everyone went home safely. They had learned to phase through fear not by becoming harder or more detached, but by becoming more present with each other, more attuned to the human elements that made them strong. It was exactly the kind of lesson that couldn't be taught in textbooks or training manuals, only discovered through shared experience and mutual vulnerability. Looking at his students now, healthy and whole and absolutely committed to each other's well-being, Minato couldn't help but think that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that might just be enough to change everything. Chapter 3. The mission that saved a world. 4 weeks had passed since the tunnel collapse beneath Shinobee Bridge, and 2 weeks since Obito's medical clearance. Team Minato was back in the field with a renewed sense of purpose that bordered on the revolutionary. Their first mission back wasn't supposed to be anything extraordinary, a reconnaissance operation in the borderlands between fire and water country, gathering intelligence on Kirigakure troop movements and supply routes. Standard wartime patrol work that hundreds of teams had conducted before them. But as Obito crouched in the morning mist beside his teammates, watching enemy Shinobee through the tree line, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this particular assignment. Maybe it was the way Minato-sense had briefed them with unusual gravity, emphasizing extraction protocols and contingency plans with an intensity that went beyond normal tactical preparation. Maybe it was the sealed scroll tucked into Rin's medical pack, emergency supplies that she'd been instructed not to open except under the most dire circumstances. Or maybe it was simply that after nearly dying together, everything felt more significant. Every decision weighted with the understanding of how quickly precious people could be lost. "Movement in the eastern camp," Kakashi whispered, his voice barely audible even though they were positioned nearly a quarter mile from the nearest enemy position. "Looks like they're preparing for a major operation. Supply wagons, medical corps, sealed storage scrolls." Obito activated his Sharingan carefully, mindful of the chakra drain and the time limits his recovery had imposed. The single Tamo spun lazily as it focused on the distant figures, picking out details that normal vision would miss. "I count at least 30 shinobi, maybe more. But there's something else." He frowned, his enhanced sight catching something that didn't quite fit the pattern of military preparation. "There are civilians in that camp, non-combatants. Prisoners?" Rin asked, her medical instincts immediately alert to the possibility of injured or mistreated captives. "I don't think so," Obito replied slowly, studying the distant figures through his activated Dojutsu. "They're moving freely, interacting with the soldiers, but they're scared." "Really scared?" The observation sent a chill through all three teammates. Scared civilians in a military operation usually meant one of two things. Either they were being used as human shields, or they were about to become unwilling participants in something far worse than conventional warfare. "We need closer reconnaissance," Kakashi decided, his tactical mind already working through approach vectors and concealment strategies. Standard formation, but with the new evacuation protocols active from the start. They moved through the mist like shadows, their months of specialized training evident in every coordinated step. Obito's partially awakened Sharingan provided early warning of patrol routes and sentry positions, while Kakashi's tactical expertise guided them through the gaps in enemy surveillance. Rin's medical knowledge proved unexpectedly useful for stealth work. Her understanding of human physiology helped her predict guard shift patterns based on fatigue cycles and stress indicators. But as they drew closer to the enemy encampment, what they discovered made all three teammates' blood run cold. "Forced Jinchuriki creation," Rin breathed, her face pale as she observed the ritual preparation taking place in the center of the camp. "They're going to seal the three tails into someone against their will." The scene below them was a nightmare of systematic preparation. Kirigakure sealing specialists had constructed an elaborate but clearly temporary containment array, a mobile field laboratory designed for rapid deployment and quick extraction once a suitable host was secured. The salt metal scent of the array's steam rose through the morning air, mixing chakra-conductive materials with the moisture of the perpetual mist. At the center of it all stood a massive water-filled tank that pulsed with malevolent energy, the three tails, Isabu, restrained but far from docile. And positioned around the perimeter, clearly intended as potential hosts, were nearly a dozen terrified civilians ranging in age from young teenagers to elderly grandparents. "They're going to test multiple candidates until they find one whose body can survive the initial sealing," Kakashi said quietly, his usual emotional detachment cracking in the face of such calculated cruelty. "The others will die in the process." Obito felt his Sharingan flicker with emotional intensity, the Tamo spinning faster as anger and determination surged through his chakra system. This was exactly the kind of situation his team's new doctrine was designed to address, not just mission success, but the preservation of innocent life at all costs. "We have to stop this," he said firmly, his voice carrying the unwavering conviction that had driven him to shield Rin from the falling stone weeks earlier. "Agreed," Rin said immediately, her medical oath demanding intervention in the face of planned mass casualties. "But how? There are too many enemy combatants for a direct assault, and the sealing array is already partially active." Kakashi was quiet for a long moment, his tactical mind running through dozens of scenarios and finding most of them ending in disaster. Traditional Shinobee doctrine would call for withdrawal and reporting. Let higher command decide whether the strategic value of stopping the ritual was worth the risk of a three-genin team. But they weren't operating under traditional doctrine anymore. "Minato-sensei's emergency protocols," he said finally. "We don't have to win the fight, we just have to create enough chaos for extraction while disrupting their operation." "The sealed scroll," Rin added, understanding immediately. "Whatever sensei gave me for emergencies, this qualifies." They spent another hour in careful observation, mapping patrol patterns and identifying key structural weaknesses in the enemy's setup. The Kirigakure forces were confident in their remote location and overwhelming numbers. which made them predictably lax about perimeter security. More importantly, their sealing array required delicate chakra balance that could be disrupted by targeting secondary convergence points while leaving the primary containment backbone intact. "Here's the plan," Kakashi said as they huddled together in the pre-dawn darkness. "Rin, you're going to use medical techniques to calm the most influential civilians first, the ones others look to for guidance. Fast-acting pressure point techniques, not chakra-based sedation that could cause complications. Obito, your Sharingan gives you the best chance of identifying weak points in their sealing array's secondary channels. I'll handle misdirection and crowd control, and if something goes wrong," Obito asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we improvise," Kakashi replied grimly. "Because failure isn't an option when innocent people's lives are at stake." Rin opened Minato's sealed scroll, revealing cached evacuation gear, lightweight stretchers, smoke pellets designed for concealment rather than combat, and emergency medical supplies that could treat shock and trauma in field conditions. "There's something else," she said quietly, studying a small additional scroll tucked among the supplies. "Instructions for temporary chakra pathway repatterning." Both her teammates looked at her with concern as she read through the technical details. "It's a way to temporarily alter the appearance of chakra capacity and flow patterns," she explained. "Make someone look like they have different spiritual energy characteristics than they actually possess." Minato-sensei must have anticipated scenarios where misdirection about Jinchuriki compatibility might be necessary. The implications hit all three of them simultaneously. "You want to become the primary target," Kakashi said, not asking but confirming his understanding of her intention. "With safeguards," Rin insisted, anticipating their objections. "The technique includes built-in contradictions, micro-repatterning of tenketsu nodes around the heart and stomach lines that will make the sealing process inherently unstable. When they try to complete the ritual, the incompatibilities will cause rejection without permanent damage to either host or Biju." "And if the contradictions don't work," Obito demanded, his Sharingan spinning with alarm. "Then you pull me out," Rin said firmly, pointing to specific passages in Minato's instructions. "The technique has a maximum duration of 90 minutes before the repatterning becomes permanent. That's our hard deadline, regardless of tactical considerations. Extraction becomes absolute priority at the 80-minute mark." Kakashi saw the tactical elegance of her plan, even as his protective instincts screamed against putting another teammate in danger. The civilian lives at stake, the intelligence value of understanding Kirigakurei's forced Jinchuriki methods, the proof of concept for their rescue-first doctrine, it all balanced on a knife's edge of calculated risk. "Medical monitoring," he decided. "Obito and I maintain constant observation through the Sharingan. Any sign that the contradictions aren't holding, any indication of actual sealing progress, and we abort immediately." "Agreed," Rin said, already beginning the delicate process of altering her chakra signature according to Minato's instructions. The attack began just as the eastern sky started to lighten, turning the perpetual mist into a gray-gold haze that provided perfect concealment for their opening moves. Rin infiltrated the civilian holding area using a combination of pressure point techniques and natural empathy, quickly identifying the most influential personalities among the captives and enlisting their help in keeping the others calm during the evacuation. Meanwhile, Obito and Kakashi approached the sealing array from opposite directions, their coordination so seamless that they might have been sharing thoughts rather than relying on predetermined signals. Obito's Sharingan allowed him to see the chakra flow patterns that maintained the containment barriers, identifying the precise secondary convergence points where targeted disruption would cause maximum systemic failure without compromising the primary restraints on Isabu itself. The first explosion came from Kakashi's position, not the massive detonation of military-grade explosive tags, but a carefully modulated blast designed to damage auxiliary equipment without killing personnel. The Kirigakurei specialists rushed to contain what they assumed was accidental chakra feedback, leaving their perimeter defenses momentarily undermanned. That was when Obito struck. His attack wasn't designed to destroy the sealing array entirely. That would have released an uncontrolled Three Tails into the surrounding area, potentially causing even more casualties than the original ritual. Instead, he targeted specific nodes in the secondary network, creating cascading failures that disrupted the delicate balance required for forced Jinchuriki creation while deliberately preserving the backbone containment channels that kept Isabu restrained. For several crucial minutes, chaos reigned in the enemy camp. Alarms sounded as sealing specialists scrambled to prevent total system collapse, while combat personnel rushed to identify and eliminate the saboteurs they assumed must be hidden somewhere in the surrounding forest. None of them expected the real threat to come from within their own defensive perimeter. "I need to become the primary target," Rin announced through their prearranged signal system as the camp erupted in controlled pandemonium around them. If they think they've found the perfect host, they'll focus all their resources on one person instead of testing multiple candidates. Before either of her teammates could raise further objections, she was moving, deliberately allowing herself to be captured by Kirigakure forces who were frantically trying to salvage their operation before the mysterious saboteurs could strike again. What followed was the most terrifying hour of Obito's young life. Watching through his Sharingan as enemy sealing specialists prepared his precious teammate for a procedure that could easily kill her. Seeing the Three Tails chakra beginning to flow toward Rin's body through the modified containment array. Monitoring her pulse spiking on his chakra-enhanced vision while tracking the countdown toward their hard extraction deadline. It was a special kind of nightmare that tested every principle of the team-first doctrine they developed. But Rin had been right about the technical aspects of her plan. The moment the Three Tails chakra made contact with her deliberately contradictory chakra pathways, the entire sealing array began to destabilize in exactly the way Minato's instructions had predicted. Instead of the smooth integration that characterized successful Jinchuriki creation, the forced merger triggered violent rejection responses that cascaded through every connected component of the secondary containment system. "Now," Kakashi whispered, and both he and Obito moved simultaneously. Their extraction was a masterpiece of coordinated precision. Kakashi used lightning-enhanced speed to create multiple diversionary explosions around the camp perimeter, drawing enemy attention outward, while Obito employed his Sharingan to navigate the failing sealing array and reach Rin's position without triggering additional chakra feedback. "Can you move?" he asked as he cut through the restraints holding her to the ritual platform, his enhanced vision showing him the dangerous levels of foreign chakra still coursing through her system. "Getting there," Rin replied through gritted teeth, her hands already glowing with healing light as she worked to purge the Three Tails' energy from her pathways before it could cause permanent damage. The rejection process is working, but it's intense. Around them, the Kirigakure camp was descending into complete chaos as their carefully constructed operation fell apart in real time. The Three Tails, no longer properly contained by the secondary systems, but still restrained by the primary backbone Obito had deliberately preserved, was beginning to manifest physically as steam and pressure, while remaining fundamentally tethered. "We need to go now," Kakashi announced as he appeared beside them, his uniform singed from the explosive diversions but his expression grimly satisfied. "I've cleared an evacuation route, but it won't stay clear for long." The escape that followed would be remembered by all three teammates as one of the most harrowing experiences of their lives. Using the cached evacuation gear from Minato's scroll, they moved the unconscious civilians through enemy territory while being pursued by increasingly desperate Kirigakure forces. The lightweight stretchers and concealment smoke proved invaluable, allowing them to maintain speed while protecting the most vulnerable members of their rescue group. When they reached a washed-out ravine that blocked their primary extraction route, their new communication protocols proved their worth. Without a single spoken word, Kakashi signaled a bridge formation, while Rin indicated medical priorities and Obito identified stable anchor points for their improvised crossing. They moved 11 civilians across the treacherous gap in under 10 minutes, a feat that would have been impossible without their months of synchronized training. When they finally reached the extraction point where Minato was waiting with backup forces, all three teammates were exhausted, injured, and running on pure determination. But they were alive, and so were all 11 civilians they'd rescued from the forced Jinchuriki ritual. Obito felt the familiar strain behind his left eye as his Sharingan finally deactivated, the extended use taking its toll despite his recovery progress. A sharp headache immediately followed, but he barely noticed it through his relief at seeing everyone safe. "Mission report," Minato said as his medical team immediately began treating the rescued civilians, his tone carrying both pride and concern as he observed his student's condition. "Target objective disrupted," Kakashi replied formally, though his voice carried undercurrents of emotion that suggested the true scope of what they'd prevented. "Enemy sealing array disabled, Three Tails containment compromised but primary restraints maintained, civilian casualties prevented." "And the method of disruption?" It was Rin who answered, her voice steady despite the obvious exhaustion and lingering effects of her ordeal. Controlled rejection cascade using temporary chakra pathway repatterning. The technique proved viable and could be standardized for similar situations. Minato's expression shifted from concern to fascination as the implications registered. You found a way to safely disrupt forced Jinchuriki creation without releasing the Biju. We found another path, Obito said simply, unconsciously echoing the words that would become central to their team's philosophy in the years to come. Instead of choosing between mission success and protecting innocent lives, we figured out how to accomplish both. The debrief that followed lasted hours, as Minato and his analysis team documented every aspect of the rescue operation for future reference. The techniques his students had developed, Rin's medical chakra manipulation, Obito's precision Sharingan application, Kakashi's coordinated misdirection tactics, represented genuine innovations in both combat doctrine and humanitarian intervention. This changes things, Minato said as they sat around a campfire that evening, the rescued civilians safely evacuated to Konoha under medical supervision. What you accomplished today, proving that there's always another option if you're creative and committed enough, that's going to influence how we approach similar situations across the entire theater of operations. You mean it'll become official policy? Rin asked, her medical mind already considering the broader applications of the techniques they'd developed. More than that, Minato replied, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight as he considered the long-term implications. It'll become proof of concept for a fundamentally different way of thinking about Shinobee work. I'm scheduling immediate briefings with Medical Corps and T, and I to develop what we'll call Sealing Disruption Protocol, version 1. Instead of accepting collateral damage as inevitable, we'll start from the assumption that there's always a way to minimize casualties if we're willing to think creatively and work harder. Kakashi nodded slowly, his tactical perspective allowing him to see how their success might ripple outward through Konoha's command structure. Other teams will want to learn these methods. Other villages will want to understand how we're achieving impossible success rates, Obito added, though his comment was followed by another wince as his overused Sharingan reminded him of its limits. And we'll document everything in our knowledge base, Rin added, pulling out their team's scroll repository. Medical signatures used, sealing array node mapping, evacuation timing data, civilian psychological management, all of it gets added to our reference materials. As they settled in for the night, each of the three teammates reflected on how dramatically their worldview had evolved since that day in the tunnels beneath Kanabi Bridge. They'd started as a competent but conventional genin team, focused on personal growth and mission completion within established parameters. Now they were pioneers of something entirely new, an approach to Shinobee work that prioritized protection and preservation above traditional metrics of success. They'd proven that another path was possible, that the choice between tactical victory and moral responsibility was a false dilemma created by limited thinking rather than genuine constraints. And in the distance, completely unnoticed by any of them, White Zetsu sank back into the earth after observing their entire operation with growing concern. The techniques they'd developed, the principles they'd demonstrated, the proof they'd provided that cooperation could overcome seemingly impossible odds, all of it represented a fundamental threat to the plans that Madara had spent decades cultivating. More troubling still was the way their success was already beginning to influence other Konoha forces, spreading through the ranks like a reflex that made old tactics obsolete. Their nonverbal coordination systems and rescue-first protocols were creating entirely new categories of tactical problem that traditional manipulation couldn't address. The ancient Uchiha would need to consider his options very carefully. The boy who was meant to be his perfect pawn had instead become the catalyst for something far more dangerous than mere idealism. He'd become living proof that hope, properly applied, could reshape reality itself. Thanks for listening, I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.